Hey there, I am Barb Higgins, and this is 1,000 Tiny Steps. In this podcast, I share my stories of love, loss, triumph, and tragedy as I continue to retrace my steps and ponder what led to the death of my daughter Molly. By doing so, I hope to not only help myself, but to bring purpose and possibility to those who listen. If you are ready to laugh, cry, shake your head in disbelief, then tie, buckle, face up, or slip on your shoes and join me as we begin our 1,000 Tiny Steps.
Hey everybody, Barb Higgins here, welcoming you to episode 146 of 1,000 Tiny Steps. So today, as I approach my 61st birthday, it's a couple months away, but still, I'm going to talk about menopause. Yay, menopause! So one of the joys of being a woman is all the hormonal physical realities of the body in which we live. You're born a little girl, then all these hormones come in, you get your period, then you menstruate for a bunch of years and you grow babies if you want, you don't if you don't want. And then the period goes away and all these things change and then you die, right? While both male and female bodies are largely driven by hormones, hormones are the chemicals that tell everything what to do. We live in a culture and a society that really associates the word hormone with sex in some way, or puberty, or menopause, or pregnancy, or hysteria, or whatever. And menopause, not surprisingly in our country, is viewed really negatively. Women, they don't look forward to it, can often feel depressed when menopause hits. It's a very sort of medicalized, negative piece of the American reality around women. My menopause story is typical in some ways and different in others. So I thought I would give a little bit of a history or a little lesson on menopause in general terms first, and then talk about myself. So menopause essentially means the ceasing of menstruation. So you stop having your period. And the official start date of anyone in menopause is when you've gone a full year without a period. Now, I know lots of my friends have gone a full year without a period and then it starts up again for who knows what reason, and then stops again. So sometimes it's not, menopause is very gray, as is the hair that comes with menopause. But anyway, that's the official sort of definition, the medical definition of menopause, the cessation or discontinuing of the menstrual cycle, no more periods. So in Western culture, as I just said, menopause is painted in a really negative vein. And when you think about what we idolize in women in the United States, especially, it's a very hypersexualized culture. You want to sell something, put a woman in a low-cut shirt with big boobs and have her hold the pack of gum you want people to chew, or stand next to the car you want everyone to drive. We're drawn to this very, very, very packaged idea of beauty, a perfect body type and perfect proportions and sexual pose and all the intrigue that goes with a sexually attractive, desirable woman. That's another whole podcast episode right there. We're not going to talk about that right now. So when women get old, and you notice this in Hollywood quite a bit, women age and they do everything they can to prevent the aging. They have facelifts and they color their hair and they wear wigs and they have plastic surgery and all these different things. And men just gracefully become wrinkly and gray. And these wrinkly gray men marry young, beautiful women. And these wrinkly gray women do not marry young, beautiful men for the most part. The hypocrisy in how we view age between men and women is very, very obvious in things like this. It's all centered around looks. There's a feeling in our country that once you can't have babies anymore, you've served your purpose. Like there's no more purpose for you. So step aside and let other young people come in. I will say in the months right after Molly died, I was suddenly thrust into a much later reality in my life. That's how it felt for me. When Molly was alive, she was in 7th grade. So I still had another full year of middle school. She was only just under 2 years out of elementary school. I still felt like I had a lot of parenting to do. And now suddenly I only had Gracie and she only had 3 years of high school left. Like I was suddenly going to be done mothering. And I do know that created a huge rush of panic in me that what's my purpose now? What I've always known and loved about myself as a woman is my ability to grow life and feed it. I loved being pregnant with Gracie and Molly. And so this was incredibly devastating to me. And our culture sort of supports it. Why do we feel this way? We function, Western culture functions a lot under a Freudian idea. Freud was a very, very paternally based psychiatrist who looked at men as the leaders and pillars of a healthy society, and women were sort of their sidekicks, right? Men were the superheroes, women were the sidekicks. Now, one can't exist without the other, but it was not a matriarchal society whatsoever. So, in looking at men as the important part of society, how do women best complement men? By having the babies. And so, for many generations of women, if you for some reason you were infertile and couldn't have babies, you had a horrible self opinion because you were a failure as a woman if you can't have a baby. Now, one thing I do like about modern society is not all women want to have babies, and so they don't have to, and they aren't necessarily criticized or judged in a broad spectrum for making those choices. But there was a time when women that couldn't have babies kept it secret or went into hiding or, ended their lives. It was very, very different. Another piece of American culture around menopause is we look at it, American culture preaches it as an end. Your child rearing days are over. This part of your life has ended. And now you just wait to die. That kind of, what's in it for women in menopause. And when I really sat down and thought about it, and I'm reading all this stuff to get ready for this interview, I'm reading and researching to get ready for the podcast. And I really did think about postmenopausal women that do great things in their 50s and 60s and 70s. We don't even consider them as postmenopausal. We're uncomfortable talking about them in relationship to the bodies in which they live. It's a very separate sort of hidden thing. I remember when I was coaching at Concord High years ago, I had an exchange student from Sweden, and she was puzzled at how sexualized American culture was and how girls would hide when they changed for track, when they changed their clothes for track practice after school. They'd turn around and hide their boobs and this and that. And Jenny was like, in Europe, first of all, we don't use our bodies to sell things. And second of all, we change in front of each other. It's not a big deal. It was just a very, very opposite sort of culture. But when you look at this method of thinking, you look at women, older women, menopausal women, right? Okay, they must have dry vaginas now, can't make a baby anymore. And a lot of the well-known side effects of menopause are the ones that center around sex and sexuality and reproduction. The hot flashes and the weight gain. Oh, I don't look good anymore. And the dry vagina, right? All of these things get sort of put into the forefront. So for a culture that glorifies beautiful women, the aging process can be really hard to take. So one of my best friends in the whole world right now is Pam. And I have a couple of other good ones right now, 3 actually, Taylor and Susan and Lisa. And so I have this circle of friends who are my age, right? And then I have my besties from life, right? Deb, Bridget, Karen, they're all my age. And when I think about all of us, sometimes one-on-one conversations and private conversations center around menopause, but we don't talk about it. It's just shushed away. We're given antidepressants. Yeah, I don't sleep, so I have a sleeping pill now. Yeah, I'm depressed, so I have an antidepressant now. And many of those medications exacerbate some of the symptoms of menopause. So we'll get to that. But what I notice in my circle of friends is that all of us worry about what we look like. All of us worry about our weight. All of us commiserate over the aches and pains that we have. I will say not many of us talk about sex, like, oh, darn, can't have sex anymore. But again, in a culture that promotes it, that can be a hard mindset to be okay with. So then, of course, I got looking at other cultures and how do other cultures look at it. So for those of you who are watching me, I keep looking to the left because this is where my little notebook is. So in Japanese culture, menopause isn't even called menopause. And up until recently, there was no Japanese word for hot flash because hot flashes didn't really exist in any big way among menopausal women. So it's called konenki. The actual translation of each syllable is as follows. So ko is renewal and regeneration. Nen is year, and ki is energy or season. So it's the year or the season of energy, renewal, and rejuvenation. Like your energy is renewed and rejuvenated. So think about that for a minute. They don't look at menopause as an end at all. They look at it as the beginning of a period of rejuvenation, of a redefining your energy. What a positive way to look at it, right? We've had our babies, or maybe we haven't, but we're not in the point now where we want them. And I know the baby piece is different for me as well. In Japan, menopause isn't looked at negatively. And the symptoms, the physical symptoms that of course come about from the decrease in estrogen are much more mitigated by balancing hormones. As estrogen decreases, make sure to balance other hormones so that the loss of estrogen isn't the primary indicator of symptoms. The other thing with Japanese culture is in general, their diet is healthier and mitigates the effects of estrogen loss. American diet, as we know, is horrifyingly bad. And when it comes to hormone loss and menopause symptoms, the American diet does nothing to mitigate and ease those symptoms. And we'll get into that in a minute. Mayan culture, so the Mayans also look at menopause as more of a transition time, like you're moving from one phase of life to the next, that it doesn't have to be the end of something. It's just you're moving through something. In the Mayan culture, when a woman enters menopause and then is fully menopausal, as in no more periods, they become spiritual leaders. They are thought to have the ability now to take on powers and energies that they couldn't channel into when they were busy creating and growing and feeding and raising babies. So many spiritual leaders in Mayan and indigenous cultures are menopausal women. And these women, these older women, are revered and looked up to. So yeah, Mayan cultures look at it that way. Indigenous cultures also look at it this way. And there's a whole story about menstrual blood being called wise blood. So in many indigenous cultures, when a girl gets her first period and becomes, quote unquote, physically, biologically female, like a woman, there's ceremonies for this, and they are revered because giving life is considered this amazing, amazing skill or blessing that a female body has. And so when menopause occurs, it's the same thing. It's a celebration, a huge celebration. And the celebration is this, that once the woman is no longer losing her menstrual blood, which is called wise blood, because the menstrual blood is the lining of the uterus, right? It's not blood from your blood vessels. It's not pumped from your heart. It's the lining of the uterus. So there is blood in this uterine tissue. And when you lose that, that's the blood that gives life. If you're pregnant, that whole uterine lining stays put and nourishes and feeds that embryo and grows it into a fetus and then a baby. So when you're no longer using your wise blood, that means you're keeping it. I just find that a fascinating way to look at menstrual blood. We're taught here in America that it's embarrassing. You should hide it. Oh, you're dirty and unclean. I think some of those biblical translations were more health related than they were judgment related. But yeah, menstrual blood is considered your wise blood. And when you can keep your wise blood, when you're no longer losing it, it unlocks your ability to receive shamanic energy. You become a shaman or a priestess or a healer. Women in these cultures are revered and respected and asked if you have a question or advice, if there is something to teach or share. These are the women that are asked as much as the high priests are. These cultures treat women, and especially menopausal women, with incredible respect. The Western culture piece of this. So I've had a couple of people ask me to do podcasts on ageism. When we live in a culture that does not appreciate wisdom, we don't necessarily respect our elders. We don't look to older people for advice. Okay, boomer is a huge insult. It's an insult to people who are old, right? Oh, you're a boomer. Of course you think that way. And it's seen as a negative thing, that these people and their experiences and the wisdom that they have gained from years of living is somehow not important, which is unfortunate because life is cyclical. And I've learned so many things my Nana told me when I was little come to fruition now. And they're not new, right? She told me these things 40, 50 years ago. So Western culture has little value on wisdom that's gained with experience. We love the proteges and the child prodigies, right? We love somebody that knows these amazing things, somebody that can graduate high school at 14. We have incredible, somebody that's a billionaire at 25. These people become heroes in our culture. And I think it's because we all wish we could be a billionaire at 25, right? Who doesn't want that? And we revere and idolize successful people for athletic endeavors and movie stars and modeling. And the things that we hero people for are very related to youthful bodies doing amazing things. Youthful being a big primary term here. Along with this lack of sort of respect for like wisdom of old people, attach it to a female, females aren't really respected male and female wise. If you want to insult a boy, tell him he's a girl. Okay, Nancy, you throw like a girl. Don't be a sissy. All of these are ways of telling a boy, you're not a man if you're acting like a woman. You're not a boy if you're acting like a girl. Like there's this difference here. That's the part of the gender conversation I agree with. My value shouldn't be placed on my body parts. With the lack of respect we have around ageism, and then the lack of respect we have around women, we don't pay them as much. Medically, we treat them completely differently. I don't have the right to decide what I put in my body or who I put in my body or what I get out of my body. Women's bodies are also not respected. They are, pornographized. And so now you have an old woman, boobs start to sag and skin gets wrinkly and things aren't quite where they were before. And there's not a lot of respect at all there. I don't know too many people who look at an old woman and think, wow, her body is a remarkable testament to her life. Now, I wouldn't want anyone to see me naked, quite frankly, but I also know that I have a pretty amazing body and it's done a lot of amazing things for me. And I don't need someone to tell me they like it or not for me to feel good about it. But that's me. Along with this idea around menopause as being negative in Western culture and being so much more positive in other cultures, that has a major effect on the symptoms of menopause. And so most of them are physical, not all of them. A lot of them are emotional. So when we get back to hormones and what hormones do, a lot of this makes sense. Any adjustment in hormones is going to change a multitude of other things. Symptoms of menopause, not surprisingly, physical symptoms are far more pronounced here in the United States than they are in any other location in the world. There are obviously going to be physical repercussions from estrogen depletion, right? Because estrogen does a lot of things. Yes, it lubricates the vagina, but it also is involved in, I'll get to this in a minute, in like 15 other body functions that have nothing to do with your vagina. And so a lot of these symptoms come from the ripple effect of lowering estrogen levels. I will say that Mayan and indigenous cultures look at sex and the role of sex in your life is not as necessary or important in older years. That men and women who are in their 60s and 70s and 80s can have sexual pleasure without intercourse, can receive sex and love fulfillment through intimacy and in other ways. And they look at painful intercourse as a solid reason for not having sex. Then don't do it. It hurts. Now, that doesn't mean if you really want to have a lot of sex that you shouldn't be able to do so pain-free. I'm not saying that. But it does sort of exemplify how wrapped up our culture is with sex. So as I said in the very beginning, we medicalize symptoms of menopause here. And so, you stop getting your period or it goes away. There's a little thing called perimenopause, which is before you lose your period. And I had a bit of perimenopause in my late 40s. I had an IUD put in, progesterone IUD, which regulated the amount of blood. So what happens is your body, you're not ovulating anymore. So your uterus is like confused, like, where's the egg? And so you overproduce all this uterine lining and you have these massively heavy periods that just, you bleed it out and your body creates more. You bleed it out and your body creates more. And that's because you have this imbalance going on, right? Estrogen and progesterone work together through every menstrual cycle you have. Egg is released, FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, right? Out comes the egg, floats on down. The uterus gets ready. Woohoo! The egg gets fertilized. Yeah, baby grows. Or the egg doesn't get fertilized. Dang, period, right? And then the whole thing starts over. So sometimes the first symptoms of menopause are excessive bleeding or, as I said before, missed period. Also, infertility. A lot of women go into menopause in their 40s and they might still be wanting to get pregnant. You stop ovulating, it's going to be hard to get pregnant. Diet, lifestyle, and hormone balance can play a bigger role in mitigating menopause symptoms in other cultures than they do here. And that's because we put a lot of external pressure on the emotional pieces. Oh, you're going through menopause. Yeah. Oh, you can't sleep. Here's a sleeping pill. Oh, you're feeling depressed. Here's an antidepressant. So again, these things don't necessarily help with what's causing those things in the first place. Another thing that came up in my research here is the life purpose piece. So as I said before, a lot of Native cultures look at the role of the postmenopausal woman, the grandmother, as a very important one. So there's this thing called the grandmother hypothesis. So wise women stop creating children and can use their knowledge, their wise blood knowledge, to assist with their grandchildren. 2 or 3 generations ago, it was not uncommon for grandparents to be living with a family. So your family would have a grandmother and a grandfather and a mother and father and children, sometimes great grandparents. My mother had 4 generations in her home at different periods of her life. And so there was this constant flow of wisdom, intergenerational stuff. Our education system takes a lot of that away. You go to school and you're only with kids your age. So there's no looking at someone that can do it better than you and looking at someone that's still developing. So we've lost a lot of that. We tend to be very focused on who we are and where we are in our lives. Grandparents assisting with the education and upbringing of their grandchildren is community building, and it creates a solid society and culture. In looking at chosen family and adopted families and people that have estranged relationships with their families, finding and replicating these generational components is super helpful and can be really, really good for the health of everyone involved. Menopausal women that are actively involved in their families, and I saw this on that Blue Zones Netflix series about living to 100, older people, men and women that were involved in the lives of their families and were seen as vital to their children and grandchildren had half the health issues that a lot of American old people have. Kind of trashing America here, Western culture. The grandmother thing is sort of another emotional and sort of cultural thing. We are also the only primates that have menopause, right? Most other mammals, when they're beyond their childbearing years, don't live a long time later. They're either, in the wild anyway, they're attacked and hunted and killed because they don't run as fast. They meet their demise without living years and years and years in a post-reproductive state. This is a very common human condition. It doesn't mean an 18-year-old cat is going to get pregnant, but it doesn't necessarily mean they can't. It's a very human condition. So female bodies change with the loss of estrogen. The symptoms can be exacerbated by stress, diet, and lifestyle, and they can be helped by those same three things. But external judgment plays a big role. Okay, I've talked about all of this. Now that you had your little lesson on menopause and how we look at it differently than other countries and how it's negative here and looked at something to sort of make fun of or bemoan or hate or not talk about. Other cultures, glorify and magnify the importance of women that have lived beyond their childbearing years and now can serve a new function in the culture and society in which they live. I'm going to talk about me a little bit. As an athlete and somebody very, very in tune with my body, what my body can do athletically has always been important to me. And I came into the athletic realm as an asthmatic and a victim of child abuse. So I had a delayed puberty onset from all the stress of my sexual abuse. I was skinny. I had a lot of physical issues around the asthma and the psychological issues. I've been an addict for a lot of my life, primarily alcohol, lots and lots of things that affect my physical well-being. Before Molly died, in my late 40s, I went through some perimenopause, some heavy bleeding and all, which I managed beautifully with my gynecologist, my OBGYN. My gynecologist at the time was super helpful, gave me an IUD, and I managed to lose a lot of those symptoms. So I was having my period. I stayed on the pill. I used the IUD. So I was still getting my period pretty much every month. In the week Molly died, I've said this before, all of us had our periods. Molly had hers, Gracie had hers, I had mine. Molly dies and then boom, I don't have another period I think after her death, I had my period twice until I was doing the IVF thing. I went into what's stress-induced menopause. So this is what stress can do to the body. So is it a sex-induced menopause? No, it's stress, systemic stress. My body was put into such trauma at the death of Molly that I went into stress-induced menopause. Some of my blood levels were still high enough to indicate that I was not quite in menopause, but my physical symptoms, I had maybe 1 month of hot flashes, and they weren't uncomfortable for me. They were I actually thought they were kind of cool. I would wake up and within an instant, I had little beads of sweat all over my whole entire body, head to toe. It was amazing. And I'd be like, wow. And then they'd go away and I was as dry as can be. My physical symptoms in that part of menopause were not noticeable at all. I didn't have, I wasn't sleeping with anybody. I didn't notice a dry vagina. I didn't have any of those symptoms at all. Low sex drive. Well, I have a dead kid. So I wasn't thinking about much. Right. And so it wasn't long after that I went to Dr. Chaudhary to try to begin the process of having a baby. And as I've said before, I couldn't do it. So for 2 years, I was going through the first 2 years of menopause. I had a period, then maybe 6 months later, I had another one, and then that was it. I didn't really notice any side effects of menopause or notice really anything. I was very wrapped up in my grief. I was drinking a lot and taking a lot of prescription drugs. So a lot of my physical pain, if I had had any at the time, would have been masked by a lot of the drugs I was putting into my body, beta blockers and such. It wasn't until I started the process of IVF that I truly realized how I was feeling. So the first thing I did in that process was to go off all of my medications. I couldn't even start the hormone treatment until I had gone off all my medication. It was in that process that I realized I had to fix my brain, my mouth. So all during that time, I was not taking any hormones whatsoever. I was going off all the medicines I was on and all of this. And so then when I was finally cleared to begin the IVF process, I really only had like 2 months of estrogen. It was to build up your uterus. So you take the estrogen and then you get a big period. Then they do it again. They would just really trying to recreate in a menopausal body fertility to grow an embryo. When I started taking the estrogen, I suddenly felt amazing. My knees didn't hurt when I got out of bed. Now, these are just things I thought, okay, I'm getting old. My feet didn't hurt as much. My hands weren't so crampy. My tummy got a little flatter. Like I started noticing, I just felt better. And I didn't really know what it was. Part of me thought, okay, I'm healthy now. I don't have the brain tumor. I'm off all of these drugs. I'm not drinking so much. I'm not taking the other drugs I was taking before. Of course, I feel better. And then the first IVF treatment didn't work. And so then I was on estrogen continually from the time the original IVF to my pregnancy diagnosis was a full year. So for a full year, I was on estrogen. So during that year, I was working out a lot more. I was growing my hair back. I was beginning to eat better. And I just felt 10 years younger. And that's when I sort of had this eye-opening experience that, wow, a lot of my physical symptoms weren't just related to grief. They were also related to estrogen depletion. In the process of trying to be healthy and in the years since having Jack, so now I have Jack and I'm nursing Jack, I'm still producing hormones to produce breast milk that a normal menopausal woman would not produce. And I know that once I stop nursing Jack, I think my menopausal symptoms would come back full force. Since I have Jack, I can't do any sort of hormone therapy because I'm nursing and it can interfere with breast milk production. So when all he was eating was breast milk, I didn't want to interfere with that at all. So I've gone to my doctor. Jack is now 3. So I just went and saw Dr. Chaudhary and I said, look, I want to go back on estrogen. I felt so good. I don't have the family things. So of course I did all the research, and estrogen was just given out willy-nilly, 20 years ago. And then it was connected to certain types of cancer. Let me be clear. The research now shows that it doesn't cause you to get a cancer you were not already predisposed to get. And it doesn't cause a cancer that has nothing to do with estrogen in your body, right? Lots and lots of women could be taking hormone replacement, could be doing estrogen treatments that aren't, because it got this sort of giant negative bad rap. Don't get me wrong. If you have one of those breast cancers that, or a brain tumor that feeds on estrogen, then you wouldn't want to take it, obviously, right? But what I didn't realize was the number of things that estrogen loss can contribute to, a lot of body pains and conditions that are often poo-pooed by medical society. I looked into herbal treatments. I hired the Get Better girl. And what I said to her was that my biggest issue wasn't being unfit. It was how much I hurt. Everything hurt. My knees hurt. My feet hurt. I can't stretch. I can't move. My hips are locked up. I get massages. I go to the chiropractor. I stretch. I really do keep my body moving a lot. And the amount of pain I have hobbling down the stairs in the morning. I'm a physically fit person. I should not hobble down the stairs. And sometimes recently, my hips and knees have been so sore that even in midday, when I've been up and about, I hobble down the stairs. So herbal remedies, I tried a lot of that. I tried dietary changes, lifestyle changes. I stopped red lighting my workouts. Remember, I did all those tests to see where my hormone levels were. I was in cortisol depletion. Cortisol is a stress hormone. Estrogen loss can actually increase cortisol. I had no estrogen and no cortisol. So my poor adrenal glands were like, wah. So lifestyle changes. I made some changes in my workouts. Phytoestrogens are plant-based compounds that mimic estrogen effects on the body. So it's not like putting estrogen in you, but your body thinks it's estrogen and responds accordingly. I've tried a couple of those with some success. I have to say, everything I tried has helped. Magnesium has helped me. Beet powder has helped me. Collagen, this one particular kind of collagen has helped me. And changing my diet, incredibly helpful. Drinking more water, super helpful. All of these things have helped, but none of them have taken away some of the crippling side effects of what I now know to be a lowering of estrogen. Acupuncture can be helpful, stress reduction, and a better diet. So, some of these things we have control over, some of them we don't. And I know as a woman, I'm very, very tender when a doctor says to me, oh, you're probably stressed out. Okay, we'll do all the physical tests first. And if they all come back normal, then let's look at stress. Shouldn't look at it first. Across all cultures have the same list of potential symptoms. In Western culture, the prevalence of a bigger chunk of them exists, and the severity of them exists. Y'all think estrogen is just for a slickery vagina. Let me be clear. Here's what estrogen decline can do, or preventing your body from absorbing your estrogen. It can cause dry skin. It can cause hot flashes. It can cause mood swings. That's not surprising. Think of a girl having her period, right? Women have mood swings all the time. It can cause muscle pain. Muscle pain. Why do I hurt so much? It can cause vertigo. I've had a huge increase in vertigo in the past couple of years, and I'm quick to blame my brain surgery on it, which I think didn't help. But I now realize that a big chunk of it is likely due to lowering estrogen. Fatigue. Night sweats. Now, I still get those. I wake up in the night and I have to kick the covers off, and then a couple hours later, I put them back on. But I noticed Jack does the same thing. So I think sometimes our room might just be stuffy. Anxiety, brain fog. I notice that for me with word retrieval sometimes. Sleeplessness. Yep. Vaginal irritation. So I don't notice that so much. Low libido. Well, I could give a crap. So maybe that's because of my estrogen loss. Weight gain. I had a shift in weight gain in my early 50s, the year that Molly died. The whole year prior to that, I was constantly trying to get below 140 pounds. Couldn't do it. Hair loss. I have noticed much thinner hair for me. Osteoporosis. That's a decrease in bone density. Depression. headaches, and the biggest one I recently learned, urinary tract infections and joint pain. Estrogen decreases. You drop a penny in a puddle and the water ripples out, right? All the ripple effects of estrogen going down. So for me, hot flashes and weight gain and all the sort of typical what you hear about menopause symptoms didn't affect me at all. I really minimal, like, oh no, menopause wasn't a big deal. However, what has been a big deal for me is climbing out of the pool 2 weeks ago. We put the pool up about a week ago, and going up the ladder, I had to like pull on the ladder to stand up. I go to CrossFit. I can back squat a lot of weight, and I shouldn't have a hard time climbing out of a pool. It has nothing to do with the strength of my muscle. It's the weakness in my joints. It's my joint, because that's a big one for me. That's what I've noticed the most. Also, joint pain, my hands like cramping up and numbing up and not working properly. My feet hurting, my knees hurting, my hips being so tight that I have to go down the stairs sideways. I can't. I remember mentioning I saw Bruce Springsteen in concert, and he didn't look old until he went up the stairs. And when he'd walk up the stairs, his body would bend a little bit. That's a weakness in the hip. So, his isn't from lack of estrogen, but it's the same hormonal shifts that happen in older people. So for me, the biggest one I've noticed, aside from my thin hair and my wrinkles, right, is joint pain and loss of mobility and strength in my joints, like massive, massive, huge problem. So I went on collagen and I went on beet powder. And both of those things, also glucosamine and chondroitin, those are things, that's a supplement that's supposed to help with joint pain. I do all of those things. It helps a little bit, but not in any sort of big, meaningful way. And I've been doing it for a year. It says that you have to do a lot of these things for 3 to 6 months. It's for a year. I did some more research, and one of the biggest conditions that's sort of associated with menopause is a systemic body condition called fibromyalgia. And it's really around, it's all over body pain. My mother developed it in her late 40s. So I did some research on it. I have a good friend at Concord High School that has it, and she's maybe 5 or 6 years younger than me. I know of another woman in my life who has it, and she is in her early 40s, mid 40s. She has a significant number of other health issues, so I think hers could be somewhat related to that. But fibromyalgia really, really focuses on the joints, right? I asked my mother, did she think any of her fibromyalgia was related to menopause symptoms? And she said at the time, no, but that the more research she did at the time, my mother cured her fibromyalgia with hypnosis. And hers came upon after a car accident and had a lot of really emotional connections to it. My mother also went on 10 years of estrogen therapy, and the fibromyalgia disappeared, and it has not returned for her. When she goes off the estrogen, a lot of her pain comes back, but never to the diagnosable level of fibromyalgia. So because my aunt has also been diagnosed with it, and my grandmother was, so because it's in my family, I keep my mind open to it. So the fact that one of my biggest menopause symptoms has been joint pain is a big issue for me. So let me talk about the magic of hormones, because at age 57, after being in menopause, official menopause for 4 years, I had a baby. So the body can be manipulated. The hormones given to me to get pregnant and to grow Jack are natural hormones in female bodies anyway. I wasn't given something that wasn't natural or normal, progesterone, FSH. My body is an anomaly. But when it comes to some of the typical things in menopause, my symptoms are clear. I notice my inability to bounce in running, spring off my feet. That's collagen depletion. So I will always and forever include collagen and foods that help absorb collagen in my daily routine, because it's made a huge difference for me. I notice it in my hair. Before I started taking collagen, which was last summer, my hair was just dry. It was that dry sort of frizzy old lady hair. Now I definitely have old lady hair, but it's so much softer now, really, really, and healthier. The collagen did that. So when I go down this whole list, dry skin, yes. But however, not super flaky dry skin, maybe on my feet, that's it. And I cover myself with oil after I get out of the shower anyway and let myself air dry. And I've done that my whole life. Hot flashes, not so much. Mood swings, no more than normal. I would say no. So dry skin, yes. Muscle pain, yes. Vertigo, yes. Fatigue, no. Night sweats, maybe. That's a maybe. Anxiety, not any different than when I was having my period. Brain fog, again, I think sometimes I wouldn't say I suffer from brain fog. Sleeplessness, I've had sleeplessness my entire life. So no, I wouldn't say that that's a huge issue for me. I wake up 2 or 3 times a night. Recently, I've been able to go back to sleep. Vaginal irritation, I don't notice it. Low libido, yeah, probably. Weight gain, yes, except that with my dietary changes and the reduction of alcohol, I've been under 130 pounds now for like 9 months. So no, I think weight gain for me is better now. But that was changing my diet. Hair loss, we talked about, yeah. Osteoporosis, I have an amazing bone density. I always have, but I've spent a lifetime running and lifting weights and all that, and those things help maintain bone density. Depression, I have situational depression. I get depressed when bad things happen. And joint pain, yes, yes. And again, I say yes. And UTI. So the UTI piece, urinary tract infections when you're young and menstruating typically happen from the outside. The bacteria comes in from the outside. A major change in the body during menopause because of the reduction in estrogen is the balance in your gut, how you digest your food, how quickly it moves through your intestines. Your intestines are set up to move food through quickly. So if food sits, it gets in between the cilia, the little hairs that are in your intestines, and it can slow down the process. You get something called leaky gut. Now suddenly you're holding on to waste product in your gut that you shouldn't. You're not processing things through as you should. You're not absorbing nutrients. All sorts of things happen in your intestines, which can lead to UTIs because your urine, it comes from your body, it goes to your kidneys and into your bladder, and then you pee it out. So if your urine coming to you is the byproduct of a digestive system that's not right and the balance is gone, there could be bacteria in the urine that makes its way to your bladder. So you get the UTI from the inside out, which is what happened to me a couple of months ago. This is another way that we use our disrespect for women against them. So I have a neighbor who's a firefighter, and he said, oh my God, the incidence of UTIs is huge now. Well, except it isn't. Older women aren't getting more UTIs than they used to get. They just get diagnosed now. They're no longer called dementia. They're no longer called, Alzheimer's. When I got my UTI, Kenny's sister, Bobby, first question she asked Kenny was Barb hallucinating? And he said, no, why? Well, their mom would start hallucinating and they would put her on medicine for a UTI and the hallucinations would go away. So some of the symptoms of the UTIs are also incredibly different because they're starting inside the gut. I've done a year. I spent a significant amount of money. It was a year ago now that I was doing all the tests and getting ready to start with Jen. I'd had my meeting with her, with the Get Better girl, and I ordered my supplements. I had done it all. I'd set it all up. And I started, and the changes in my physical reality have been profound, profound. However, now that I'm a year in, and again, I think my body sort of adjusts and adapts, I find that my knee and hip immobility and pains are increasing again, becoming more significantly obstructive in my life. So I went back to Dr. Chaudhary and I said, I'd like to go back on estrogen. So this is a bit controversial. I have some friends who are like, what? What are you doing that for? Hormone replacement therapy is unhealthy. Now, hormones and hormone replacement therapy is getting a lot of news lately in the transgender community because it's used to assist in gender affirming care. So I think to make sure that everybody is healthy and well, we need to really educate ourselves on all of the things that hormones are in charge of. And for me, I know that my loss in estrogen really affected me in ways that I didn't even know had anything to do with estrogen. All right. So how does estrogen affect the body physically? Now, I'm sharing this because if you're listening to me and you're in menopause or having a difficult time, there might be things you don't know that will help you. In addition to regulating the menstrual cycle, estrogen affects the reproductive tract. So fallopian tubes, uterus, ovaries. These organs, when women go through menopause, begin to deteriorate. They become, what's the word I'm looking for? They get smaller, they atrophy, right? And they can't always be repaired. Like I can take all the estrogen, now, the reason I can have a baby is because they filled me up with estrogen and my uterus was still healthy enough to grow the baby. Not all women can. My ovaries, however, are almost impossible to find now, because they're not ovulating, so they get smaller. The urinary tract, I just talked about this. It changes the whole way our body processes bacteria and things in our bodies. The heart and blood vessels. So circulation. Circulation is also one of the major causes of joint pain and muscle pain. Poor circulation increases these things. That's why beet powder has been helpful for me because beet powder has nitrates in it that increases circulation. Bones, osteoporosis. Breasts. Well, mine are full of milk most of the time, so I'll see how bad they are when that's over. Mucous membranes. Mucous membranes, your nose, your mouth, your vagina, mucous membranes, your eyes, all of those things become dry. Pelvic muscles. So pelvic muscles aren't only just your vaginal muscles, but your whole pelvis area. Tight hips is one of the main causes of knee injuries. My round ligaments, the ones that sort of connect the muscles in your lower belly to your pelvis and your legs, lack of estrogen, less collagen, tighter ligaments and tendons. They're not as healthy. They don't work as well. Boom, you get really stiff and sore. So your pelvic muscles take a beating. And then the brain, how we think, how we process information. Estrogen is involved in all of these things. So I am now on day 6 of estrogen. I started Monday. So today is day 6. In just 6 days of taking estrogen, I have noticed that my hair is a teeny bit thicker, not a lot, but when I put it into a ponytail, it's not as skinny as it was a week ago. It just isn't. I have noticed that while my knees and hips are still sore, I went downstairs this morning, 1 foot after another, as opposed to 1 foot at a time, like stepping down, always leading with the same leg. I haven't been able to do that for months. I've noticed this already. My sleep had improved somewhat anyway, but I've been woken up by Jack several times over the last few nights and fallen right back to sleep. I wake up thinking, oh, it's probably midnight and it's 4 a.m. And I'm like, wow, I slept for 4 hours. So I have noticed an improvement in my sleep. We'll see the UTI piece. I don't get those very often, but I'm hoping that my digestive system takes a rest. The other thing with taking hormone therapy, so there are a couple of things that I looked up, that I read about some of the risks. So I have a uterus, which means I have a cervix, which means I have a uterine lining, and estrogen therapy without progesterone in women that still have their uterus can cause an increase in uterine cancer. Not cervical cancer, that's not connected to the hormones in the same way. So I have an IUD in right now, a progesterone IUD. And every once in a while, he said I might be crampy for a couple of weeks, and I have noticed that. So I have a progesterone IUD, which provides my endometrium, the lining of my uterus, with progesterone. And I'm taking the estrogen. So I won't increase my risk of uterine cancer because I'm more mimicking what my reproductive system would have been like before menopause. So I'm on day 7. So you're warned as a woman who's doing this to make sure to, check in with your doctor, pay attention to physical symptoms. As a competitive athlete, I do this all the time. One of my major goals athletically is to make it to the CrossFit Games. So I have a lot of training to do, and I cannot function in a body with menopausal joints that aren't doing what I need them to do. So while I am reaping the benefits of hormone replacement therapy of estrogen, I am also truly researching foods that increase estrogen absorption, foods that mimic estrogen in the body, all the things that I can do naturally, because I do know that if I have 40 years of life ahead of me, which I'm quite sure I do, I can't be taking estrogen for 40 years. I'll have to go on it and off it in my life. I think it's just better that way, or adjust the dosages. And these are things I think as more medical research is done, more information will be found. So does taking estrogen give me more revere and respect from my counterparts in the United States of America? Heck no. The whole, ageism, move over old lady, okay, boomer. I sit all by myself in school board meetings. Believe me, I am the old lady. I am the old lady in the room. But if I can feel better inside my skin, then I'm excited to be doing this. I would love to hear from my menopause-related, age-related women in my life how you're feeling and how menopause has affected you. I won't share it publicly if you don't want me to. I will keep track of physical changes that I notice and emotional changes that I notice on my social media, like in my Facebook Lives and such, because I think it's useful information to share. And if mitigating menopause symptoms can make me feel better physically, then I'm going to feel better emotionally and spiritually and all that as well. So I know this was long and tedious and sort of full of information, but I tell you what, in my 1,000 tiny steps of life, I've gone through a lot of ups and downs to get right here where I am now. And I want to be a vibrant, healthy mother for Jack. I want to travel and do wonderful things. Come on, menopause, show me what you got. Anyway, so listen, be good to yourself. If you have physical issues in your body, research them. If you are receiving any sort of hormonal care, whether it's, menopause care like me, or gender affirming care, or you're involved with somebody that's going through these things, knowledge is power. Do your research. Research is one of the most important things we can do as women or as human beings in society. Going into anything with knowledge is going to make the outcome better and more manageable and hopefully more positive. There's so many things I thought I knew that I didn't know. The UTI thing still blows my mind. So do your research, and then share what you know in loving, kind ways with others. So anyway, be good to yourself. And if that means going to your OBGYN for hormone replacement therapy, do it. Be good to someone else. And if that means sitting on a log with them while they're sad and just being there with them, then do that. And as always, have a good day, everybody.
Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.